you want me to go, Adam?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So welcome everybody. I'm Joe Schmidt, I'm the Vice Chair Chief, and I was given the task of introducing the rest of the folks that are joining us from the Baystate side. Dr. Niels Rathlev, who's my boss and the chair of emergency medicine here at Baystate. We have Dr. Ben Osborne, who is the Vice Chair for Education and the Residency Program Director. Dr. Elizabeth Schoenfeld, who is the Vice Chair for Research. We have Dr. Julie Hetler, who is the Chief of the PDED.
I'm here with Fauci today.
And Dr. Fauci today. Did you bring Dr. Fauci with you today?
Always.
Outstanding. We also have Dr. Margaret Goodrich, who is a former chief resident and our current med education fellow who's helping facilitate these. And Dr. Ashley Coons, who's one of our current chief residents and future faculty at Baystate. So I think what we've been asked to do, and I think it makes a lot of sense, is for each of us to give you just a few minutes about what we do here and how we got to those jobs, and then allow a lot of time for you guys to ask questions so we can answer whatever information you guys are looking for. And I'll, as always, start with my boss because that's the safe thing to do and let him go first.
Thank you very much and welcome everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Niels Rathlev. I'm the chair of the department and I've been here for 12 years now. I trained in Boston and was faculty in Boston for many, many years. I was actually program director for 1 year, which was the best role ever, and a role that I thought I would continue for the rest of my career and would have been happy doing it. My boss decided that I needed to become the vice chair, so after holding out for several months, he finally convinced me, and so I became the vice chair and did that for a number of years, and then 12 years ago came out here as chair. And I have not regretted it. Clearly, the challenges of a chair are on a somewhat different scale than a program director, but nonetheless, I'm pleased with the progress that we have made here, while challenges certainly continue with respect to boarding in particular and our response to COVID. But I'm optimistic about our future.
I guess I can go next. So, as I said, I'm Joe Schmidt. I'm the current vice chair and chief, which is the clinical operations director for our department. I grew up in New York, but fell in love with Western Massachusetts as an undergrad. Went to Boston for grad school and med school. Realized it was really expensive, and became an indentured servant to the federal government through the Health Profession Scholarship Program. Spent 8 years in the Air Force on active duty, where I did my training in San Antonio in a joint program, and then stayed on as faculty there. Came here in the year 2000, so I've been here for 20 years. The first 11 of which were on the residency education side of the house. I was the medical student coordinator, associate program director, and then Dr. Osborne's predecessor as the program director for the residency program. And actually, I'll disagree with Dr. Rathlev a little bit. Being associate program director is the best job in the world. So Dr. Kellogg understands that, I think, well. All the fun and less of the responsibility. I then in 2011, as we were about to move to our new home in our new hospital, my predecessor as chief, who had been vice chair and chief for 30 years, John Santoro, decided he didn't want to do that anymore. And so I took on the responsibility of being the chief and eventually the vice chair. I think that it's, echo what Dr. Rathlev said. We are not devoid of challenges, but that certainly brings us the opportunity to, try to solve a problem every day, or several problems every day. And I think it's probably what draws us all to administration and leadership in administration is the realization that we, you know, we are folks that are frustrated sometimes with the way things work, and but feel like the most functional way to deal with that is to try to get involved in the solution and not just complain about it.
I'll echo that.
I don't know how we want to go. Ben, you want to go next?
Sure, I can go. So I'm originally from I'm the program director of INSO for, this is my 10th year doing so, because as per Joe's story, I actually tend to follow him around. I grew up in California. I was the number 5 of 7 children. Went to school in San Diego, came out to Tufts for med school because it was the most expensive school I could find. And I came out here for residency because of the people that were here. I had a choice of where I could go, and without a doubt, it was the people I met here that I loved. I then went to the Air Force because they paid for the very expensive med school. Spent 4 years down there. By the time I was done, I was the vice chair of the department there. And then I went to Albany for a year, and I've been here since. One common thing I think you're going to hear across all of us is none of us are started off in our jobs, and none of us started off in our current paths. We all stepped up when work needed to be done. I was the EMS director in San Antonio, and then I was helping out with the schedule, and then next thing you know, I'm running different parts, and then I'm suddenly in charge of the department. And same thing I got here. I came here as EMS director, and then, hey, we need someone to help out with associate program director. I'm not sure what I was planning for, but it's where the need was. And you don't get to come and say, I'm going to be chair someday. You work your way up through the work that's there. And so that those opportunities arise, and people who work hard, show up on time, and really take care of their team are the ones that get promoted. So your goals you may have a long-term goal, but that's 20 years down the line, but you have to do some other work to get there. And so and that's where I am now. I love my job, love what I do, and I get to support phenomenal people, but it is not a straight path for any of us.
Elizabeth? You're on mute.
I was saying I thought Jolie was the natural next person, but I'll go. My name's Elizabeth Schoenfeld. I'm the Vice Chair of Research. Totally agree with what Ben just said about our circuitous path. Mine, and I really like telling people this because people don't always know how you get to research. But I went to Brown for undergrad and med school, and I went to GW for a 4-year residency. And I did 4 years because I wanted 4 years and I wanted sort of the flexibility of that. And then I did an ultrasound fellowship. And part of that was that there weren't a lot of research fellowships available at that time. It wasn't really as much of a thing. So nobody was saying, hey, why don't you think about a research fellowship? So I did an ultrasound fellowship. And during that whole time, I was always doing a little bit of research. And then after that, I came to Baystate, which was exactly 10 years ago yesterday. And I did a little bit of research, and I did a lot of ultrasound and education. And I was sort of moving along in the ultrasound pathway. And I actually was just remembering that 5 or 6 years ago, the program director of ultrasound at that point said, hey, do you want to be the fellowship director? And it was right as I was switching paths. And I was like, no, I think I want to go get a research degree. And I switched paths and sort of did a research fellowship and ended up doing research. And it's been super fulfilling. And part of that has also been that there weren't a ton of people doing research in our department. And it was a great opportunity. We have this huge, big, wonderful hospital with a big community and a lot of need. And there's a lot of research opportunities here. So now we're doing more research than we ever have before, and we've got more grants, and we're building our infrastructure. So it was a really great opportunity to step into.
Jolie?
Hi, so I'm the pediatrician in the group. I'm peds trained, and so y'all don't care anything about where I train. But I'm from the Midwest, ended up in the Northeast because my path ended in Boston. And I moved to the area truly for lifestyle to raise my kids. And I've been here for 14 years, and there was an opening as division chief that none of us wanted, but we all loved working here, and we knew that it needed to be done. And I have to say, I am a sucker for good leadership. As these people can tell you that know me, I'm pretty intolerant of bad leadership, especially above me. And it's been really nice here, feeling like we have a very solid doctor leadership structure all the way to the top. And we certainly saw that during COVID. And so I felt like I had the skill set, and I was willing to do it truly out of love and respect for my colleagues. I feel like the division chief role here is to make the job easier of my colleagues so they can do what they love every day. And so much of my job now is sort of what I call unplanned work. I sit around and wait for things to happen. And then when I'm not busy, trying to put out fires or managing things, I'm looking for, what low-hanging fruit is left to make things easier, and then what are the big things and how do I tackle them? So that's my story. And I would say if you are destined, like you really want to be a chair at this point, you should come and talk to us, because I think you need to be motivated by something other than that, or I imagine it won't be fulfilling to you.
Adam, are you participating or facilitating, or do you want to tell your story, or?
So weird. Moved it all.
He might just have it on for us because he's running the Zoom, so he may be walked away.
Well, if Adam wants to, he can certainly come back later. I guess, Margaret, why don't you tell us your story?
Yeah, so I'm Margaret. I am a medical education fellow. I did my residency here. I drank the Baystate Kool-Aid and I love it, which I think you'll hear. Obviously, you have already heard from a lot of people up at the top, but even for those of us who are residents, fellows, junior faculty, really the people are what make Baystate as awesome as it is. If I were in your shoes, I would pick Baystate all over again. So obviously I am new to being and attending, and but that doesn't mean that I haven't been involved in leadership. And I think that that's an important thing for you to realize, is that leadership can take a lot of different forms. So even just from being involved in like your emergency medicine interest group or other groups, I was involved in my EMIG, as well as some other groups at my medical school. And then even in residency, kind of taking on some of those leadership roles, like when Osborne invariably sent out a request for something to be done for some weird little project, I was usually one of those people responding back saying yes. And the reasons for that were for a couple of things. One, because I care about my co-residents and I care about the people that I work with, and I wanted to be able to do what I could to help them, to help, kind of like Jolie was saying, kind of help make their lives better. And, for things regarding interviews and interview season, I really wanted people to know what was awesome about Baystate. So I think even this early in your career, there's a lot of opportunity for leadership things that may not be explicitly stated as leadership. So I did a lot in residency with recruitment. I was a chief resident, which was another way for me to be able to be a conduit for the residents, between the residents and the program leadership, and to be just a resource for the junior residents. And then, as happenstance would have it, I kind of fell into a fairly decently sized leadership role within EMRA. I was part of a new group called the Leadership Academy its very first year as a participant. And then, what do you know, they were looking for an associate director. So I applied and I got it. Was not entirely, it was one of those, like, I really wasn't really planning on it when I started. And now I am the director of that group. And so there's a lot of opportunities that can lead to things that you wouldn't have necessarily thought of. When I did the Leadership Academy the first year, I was like, this sounds cool. I'll learn more about being a leader. Yippee. And now here I am being the director of it in its third year. So take advantage of those opportunities as they present themselves.
Ashley, I think you're next.
Sounds good. I can kind of round out the rest of it. So I'm Ashley Coons. I'm one of the chief residents right now. My training actually brought me out here. I kind of was from a little bit all over the place. Started out in California, Nebraska, Connecticut, back to Nebraska for grad school, or for undergrad and med school. Knew that I wanted to come back out east. Actually knew Baystate was on my radar back in second year of med school, and kind of knew I wanted to end up in around Massachusetts. And then when I ended up coming out for my interview rotation, I just absolutely, again, fell in love with all the people. I knew pretty much as soon as I set foot in the department that these were my kind of people. Everyone talked with such respect between themselves, between their colleagues, between the other residents. And really what I loved was how we were able to connect with our attendings, because it really feels more like a colleague relationship where they are invested in you as people. And that was the thing that really kind of drew me, besides the fact that I just adore everyone here. obviously, like Margaret said, drink the Kool-Aid. I'm sticking around for next year. So these are definitely my people, and I'm excited to continue doing leadership roles here. Right now, most of my leadership here is within the role of chief resident. So a lot of that, like Margaret kind of alluded to, is acting as a liaison between the residents and the administration, but also between our residency and other residency programs as well. That's one of the things that I really enjoy, is creating those relationships, breaking down those silos so that we can all work better to take care of patients. And I find that the best way for us to do that is by working together as colleagues, and not as, this is my spot, this is your spot, and we're gonna fight and try and keep that separate. So I really enjoyed that role. And the other part that I really enjoyed is kind of advocating for our residents as well. You know, not that we need all that much advocating, as I feel like a lot of us are pretty comfortable with bringing up the things that we have concerns about, but it has felt nice to kind of make sure that all of our residents are caretaked. So just enjoying, looking forward to other future leadership roles with that.
I wanted to add one more thing. We were focusing on leadership roles, obviously at Baystate, because this is really sort of what this is about. But when you guys, I just sort of like what Margaret was saying, there's a ton of great leadership roles on national organizations. EMRA and SAM and ASAP are always looking for residents to get involved in different committees. So I'm the co-chair of the upcoming consensus conference next spring. And you know, if this one is on social emergency medicine, but as things come up, if there are things that interest you, you know, you get involved at the ground floor, and before you know it, there are leadership opportunities everywhere. And a lot of the things that you would think about as these like big committees with people who are very high up, they really want med student and resident representation. And so you get in early as a representative, and you meet people and you see how people get things done. And there's just really a lot of opportunities to be involved.
I think at this point we could start with any questions that anybody had.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name's Seth Butler. I'm a fourth year from the University of New England up in Maine. I know, Dr. Coons, you're the kind of chief resident on the panel, but I was curious if anyone else kind of considered doing a chief residency as part of a leadership, or kind of like Dr. Goodrich, like you were saying, if it just took on more informal leadership roles in the residency.
I'll answer quickly. Again, it was a different world, but I was a chief resident, which in pediatrics is an extra year. And it really gave me nice insight into what it means to take a job in an academic medical center. I don't think that I fully understood as a resident in a pretty healthy program all of the small dysfunctions that might drive the right personality style crazy. And so it was really nice to go into my first academic job with open eyes, not being scared that I was going to run away.
And I think something nice about here is that there's 4 chief residents right now. So it's not that a single person is doing all of the work, because there's a decent amount of work with it, but it feels less so when you have other good co-chief residents who will share that burden with you. And you'll kind of find that, I mean, everybody has strengths and weaknesses. And like my year specifically, we had one chief who just like was like the schedule master. She, anytime we couldn't figure out some swap or some issue or whatever, we basically just looked at her, and 3 minutes later, she's like, yeah, do this, this, and this. And so it allows you to kind of start to realize working in a group as a team as a chief resident, which I thought was really nice, because you can start to figure out how to delegate, how to, if there are issues that arise, you know, how to communicate and work those out as a team. So I thought that the chief year, especially if you don't feel like you've had a lot of leadership experience before, was a really nice way to kind of start to get some experience in that, knowing that if you truly had no idea what to do, that the program leadership was right there behind you, willing to answer any question or any concern that you had.
I was a chief resident 20 years ago, and I didn't step into it thinking I'm going to be a leader. I stepped into it thinking I was going to help my team, thinking that I wanted to help things get done the right way, at least the way that I saw them to be done right. and that's how most of my roles have gone. It's not, I do think of myself as a leader now, but it took a while before I'd identified myself as that, and that's, it's a little bit of a paradigm shift when it's more about the service, but you realize that people are watching you and looking for your guidance as opposed to you're just the one getting the project done, and it made a difference in how I carry myself when I started thinking about myself that way, as opposed to I'm just the one here to get the task done. And there's a lot of responsibility because when you get in charge, you're always looked at. If I catch Joe eating a sandwich in the department, which we're not supposed to do, Joe's like, and he knows he can't, but he'll sneak off and do it. So you have to constantly watch to set the example for everyone else. But at the same time, remain who you are. If you start pretending you're somebody else, if you're not authentically you, then you start to regret that, and your team will know that, and then you're going to lose them. So it's, I get the role of leader, but I didn't start that way.
So I'll give you the flip side. So I was not a chief resident, but unlike Ben, I definitely saw myself as chief resident material. And we had a great class, and it was just a vote. And I just didn't happen to be chief resident. We had three great chief residents, and I got over it. And there was still lots of opportunities to be a leader and to be helpful to the team and that sort of thing. And so, in that moment, I was disappointed, but I don't think that it was a hindrance to future positions. I'm sure I missed out on some learning opportunities that I then was able to sort of pick up later. So, it's one of these things that sometimes you are and sometimes you aren't. And I remember I had one colleague at the time who was also disappointed that he wasn't chief, and he was, you go to med school and you've to get this far, you've been a little bit of an overachiever. So sometimes it hurts when but you have 12 people in that residency class and you can't all be overachievers. You can't all be chiefs. So, sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't, and you find other places to work on those, to get those leadership skills. So not the end of the world if you are not chief.
So I will just comment also. I was also not chief resident, and to be perfectly honest, I had absolutely no interest in being chief resident in residency, which is now many, many years ago. And I will just say that the reason that I began taking on leadership roles, my first role was as assistant program director and then program director, because I basically just thought I could do a better job than the person who was in the current role. I had a different philosophy about how things should be done, and I wanted the opportunity to do something different. And the same thing came to my chair. I had a wonderful chair in Boston that I worked for many, many years, but there were some things that I just thought, you know what, I really would do that differently, and I want to have the opportunity to do it. And that's why I'm doing this now.
I have another question, if it's okay to move to another one. I'm wondering, my name's Holly. I am fourth year at Hofstra on Long Island. I'm actually from Brookfield, so I'm pretty familiar with Western Mass. It's right near Sturbridge, Mass. So I was wondering what Baystate does to continuously cultivate leadership skills in their residents. And then also kind of a second question, more specifically, women leaders, or if there's anything special you do to cultivate leadership with the women in your program.
Go, Elizabeth. Ashley.
I'm gonna let Ashley go. Take
Margaret.
We have so many women leaders, and that was one of the things that absolutely blew my mind when I came, because it was just like, oh, we have a leader in EKG reading, Ashley Deutsch. We have a leader in multiple leaders in research, Elizabeth Schoenfeld, Lauren Westifer. We have just outstanding women leadership all throughout. And so I think part of it is just lead by example, which is the best way to do it. We have a lot of other physicians. I'm thinking of Jeanette Wolf, who is currently trying to create more programs in which women can work on some of their public speaking skills, because that tends to be one of the things that kind of can hold us back in professional settings, especially in academics, when going to public speaking is a thing that we need to do. And so she's working on something with medical students, residents, and attendings alike that anyone can join. That's one specific thing I can think of. So that was part of the second part of your question.
For the first part, as residents, we give you, the biggest thing I work on you as a leader is how to run your room, how to run your pod, how to run your department clinically, because, and those skills translate over to everything else you do in life. It's how you carry yourself. It's, do you, where's your, how to keep your emotional intelligence in check so you can actually not explode when something doesn't go the way you want it to, that you can run your team in a way that's efficient and smooth. And so we work constantly with you on that. Other opportunities, if you have interest in running groups or being parts of committees or other parts of the hospital, we have room for residents, but many don't want anything to do with it, and that's okay. It's just not where their interest lies. But if you suddenly want to be, on the committee that's dealing with different parts of the hospital, from the STEMIs to the traumas, you're welcome to it. You're welcome to, and we'd like to have residents present. But it's, my biggest goal is to make sure that you're able to run your team, because that's my charge, is to make sure you can do that. But if you learn that well, it'll pass over to a lot of other things in your life.
So Baystate has a couple of different things. Like Ashley was talking about, there was this great, I think we still have it, this great Speak Up program to cultivate people's speaking abilities. There's a Baystate Women in Medicine that has various like social events and awards and scholarships and money for conferences and that sort of thing, which just really tries to support women in the organization. We used to actually we would try to have sort of like women night sorts of things within the residency. And I think what we sort of found is that we really have the attendings and the residents really have a great relationship. And even during COVID times, we sort of get together in different ways. And I think we sort of felt at some point, maybe this was just me, that we really didn't need to do it by gender, like that people could show up and it actually worked out great, and it still felt like a safe space for everyone. And I think that there's a lot of informal and formal mentorship, and the attendings are really happy to sort of help people and mentor people. So there are explicit programs, and then I think that there are a lot of informal things that happen.
And I think, speaking to kind of Osborne's point about if you're interested in like a committee or something like that, I think a lot of the leadership encouragement and support and things like that comes just from the culture that if you want to do it, the leadership is willing to help you get there. So if you have a vision, if you have something that you want to accomplish, a group you want to be a part of, you see an area for quality improvement or something like that, the administration is going to do whatever they can to help you be successful in that. And that permeates through all of the faculty, not just the program leadership itself. It's all of the faculty are really willing to help you reach whatever goals that you have. And if that specific faculty can't help you get there, they will probably know who can. So I think that the fact that they're just supportive of you doing whatever you want kind of speaks to the leadership as well.
So I have a question for the group, for the faculty here to help spur us along. What do you want to see in your junior faculty and your residents? What kind of characteristics do you want to see them do? How do you want them to carry themselves so you recognize them as a leader for their potential and give them the next opportunity? So this is more to the faculty as to what they think.
I would start with, I love it when somebody comes to me with a problem and either a proposed solution or an intention to learn more about it. I guess that's just the opposite of complaining, but like I've identified this as a problem and it's big enough that I'm invested enough to try to help give you some ideas, or better yet, help you fix it.
I would say that one of the key components is I think it's relatively common for people to come forward with issues and even with potential solutions, but much less common for them to stick with the process of actually making something better, which is usually longer and potentially a little more painful than people initially thought it would be. And so that level of sort of, doesn't matter that it's a big project or a little project, the idea that people stick through the entire process to the end is very important.
Yeah, I think similarly and tied to that, I really love to see when someone is passionate about what their issue is. And I mean, I think that passionate about it leads them to be able to stick through it and to be able to navigate the challenges and sort of, you know, where there's a will, there's a way. You care about the problem. You also care about finding out the solution. If solution A doesn't work, you care about investigating solution B. And I think that that sort of a passion in one particular area, I think it's very easy for us to try to want to help people when they sort of bring that level of interest in something.
So I know I'm not faculty yet, but what I like to see in other people on shift and like what makes you a leader in the actual department to me is being able to look to your colleague to your right or to your left and recognize when they need help and being able to provide that help when you're on shift. That to me is a leader above anything else because it means you're a full team player. I know that I can trust you and rely on you and when I need you. And that to me is the sign of a good colleague and eventual leader because you recognize what's going on and what is needed around you.
Actually, and I totally agree. I would add asking for help too and not being afraid to ask
Yep.
for help when you need it.
Absolutely.
As the newest faculty member, most junior faculty member officially. For me, I think a really big thing is respect, because I find that having respect for your colleagues really helps to get things done. So treating everybody from your physician colleagues to your nurse colleagues to even the environmental services people just with respect. To me, I would much rather work for you or be working with you than someone who looks down on others, is disrespectful, is anything like that. So for me, a lot of respect, which can encompass a number of things, including the looking out for your other colleagues, noticing when they need help, everything like that.
I think related to that is the sort of the professionalism that Ben was talking about in terms of being a leader. Like there's, you know, it's a tough environment to work in. There's always going to be a little bit of complaining, oh, I can't believe this, I can't believe that sort of thing. But the more that you are able to sort of stay professional and to remember that people look at you to set the tone. So if it's a bad night, are you projecting optimism? What are we going to do to fix this? Or are you complaining about the fact that the system doesn't work? And I think that professionalism goes hand in hand with what Margaret's saying in terms of the respect. You treat everybody that you work with the same way because everybody is on the same team. And you ask people's names, and if you don't know someone's name, you figure it out. And if you don't know where someone is, you try to find them. And so that level of respect and professionalism, I think, goes a long way and sets the tone for the rest of the department. Ben, do you want to answer the question, your answer to the question?
You guys did a pretty good job. You know, it's the, I think you covered all the bases there. So we've also talked to you guys multiple times where people said, you're going to step up, you're going to take the tasks in front of you. They're going to be sitting there and you're going to grab them. You're going to get overwhelmed if you say yes to everything. You know, that's going to, you know, it's, especially during residency or even in your career, there's going to be, you're going to have, you know, you're going to have 6 burners going on your 4-burner stove trying to make it happen. And so it's, my question to everyone else again is how do you say no to, how do you want to have no said to you as the boss? You know, there's sometimes when the silverback gorilla comes in the room and says you have to do this, you just do it. There's times that Niels and Joe or other people come to my office and say you have to get this done, and I do. But there's also times I say I can't, and it's so I'd love to hear them hear how you protect yourself and what do you think the best, how they respect that the most.
Well, one thing I think that helps is when you have a clear purpose and that clear purpose is endorsed or really supported by the people above you. So I had a sort of distinct experience the other day where, you know, Niels and I have been talking about what are the goals of the research division, and our highest priority is supporting research of this department, which involves, you know, getting funding for infrastructure and these big R01 grants. And another faculty member came to me and said, hey, I really think we've got this industry thing that's really interesting to me. I really think that we should get the research team in and looking at this, and it sounded like a whole lot of work, and it didn't move us towards, and it sounded interesting, but it didn't move us towards the goal, and it was my goal, but it was also supported by my mentors and my boss. And so in that moment, I was like, oh yeah, that's really interesting. Wait a second, no. Like, I was just like, you know, that sounds really interesting, But I've been told, and I agree, that these are our goals as a division right now. And I just think I can't make that a priority. And I think I didn't say no. I just said, that sounds really interesting, but I'm just not sure we're going to be able to make that a priority with these other things that we have to do. So the fact that I was supported in that by the fact that, we had this common goal that we had discussed, I think was really helpful. But when people ask you, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Particularly as junior faculty, on the one hand, you want to say yes because you want to get stuff done. And on the other hand, you have to keep your long-term goals in mind. Is this what my long-term goal? Does this help? Does it give me a skill? Does it give me a collaboration? Does it do something important for the department? Where does it fit in with all those pieces in terms of whether I should say yes to this and sort of can say yes to this? So.
I'll say from my perspective, I try really hard not to assign tasks to people if I know that it is not within their sphere of interest. I think that just leads to bad outcomes, poor performance, et cetera. And I really try to marry what the individual faculty member is passionate about, what they would like to do, with what the department needs are. But to come in and say, go do this committee, when the faculty member has absolutely no interest in that, I think does not lead to success for anybody.
I'll add on to that. I tend to also look at what skills are needed for this task and who on my team has the skill set to be able to do that with less painfully than somebody else. And I also, from my division small, there are 13 of us, and I kind of know everybody, what their work-life balance, what their wellness looks like. And so for me, I also am trying to choose things that won't have a big negative impact on how they currently live their lives. So for instance, I have a faculty member who works nights and has 3 little boys, and finding something that would fit in her lifestyle wasn't really easy, but an opportunity came up for her to be our representative to trauma, which required like a specific meeting that was timed at 7 a.m., which is not a good time of day for many people that work mostly evenings. And it wasn't an area of interest for her. But 8 years later, she's now our expert on child abuse and how we stay compliant with the trauma regulations. And it's been a really pretty painless way for her to keep contributing to the division. And so I like to think about the whole person as well.
So what you're hearing from our leaders right now, from my department, is that they understand our team's goals. Elizabeth outlined it beautifully. You want to know what your goals are. And it's nice if you can marry those with your boss and make sure they understand what your goals are also. So meeting with them and making sure they understand what you're aiming for and where you think and how can they help you get there. And so it's not a surprise to them when you come back and say, gosh, that's not what I want to do. I want to run this part of the department. I want to run this part. And it's like, and sometimes you do have to do something you don't love, but it's something when my residents are out looking for new jobs, when they're graduating, I tell them, look for the person they're going to work for. Don't worry about the volume. Don't worry about the location. Find a boss that you're going to love and that's going to take care of you. You don't have to agree with everything they do. You have to agree with their style. So.
I think as the quintessential yes person, I am 1000% guilty of saying yes to probably more things than I should. And it is something I am truly trying to work on. So coming from somebody who has overcommitted themselves, I don't even know how many times, I think I'm starting to try and look at projects and things more from the perspective of what am I trading off? So you only have so much time in a day and you have so many priorities. So I'm trying to be more mindful of what am I going to have to give up or decrease what else I'm doing if I take on this project. Board exams are coming up. I don't know if you've heard about it. You apparently have to take a board exam to like officially be an ED doc. I don't know. So that's coming up in November. And so when obviously I'm doing a number of things for my fellowship, I'm taking on a lot of projects, yada, yada, yada. And so there was a discussion that I had with my fellowship director, I don't know, a couple weeks ago or something. And he jokingly, kind of not jokingly, was like, oh yeah, and you can do this. And I had to look at him straight in the face and say no, because I knew that I was starting to trade off time for studying, time with my significant other, and kind of just my sanity if I was going to pick up another project. So and of course, it's also nice to have a mutual respect between you and your superiors, that you can look at them and be like, no, I am drowning, and have them respect you when you say, I really and honestly cannot do that. And I think you can also, if it is something that's interesting to you, but you know that you physically cannot do it right this minute, to say, I'm really interested in that. I don't have the bandwidth right now, but could we check in 3 months, 6 months, whatever, if you know that you have another project that's going to be coming off at some point, because then it tells them that you're not completely closed off to the idea, you're still willing to work on it, and you're mindful of the fact that if you try and do it right now, it might not be exactly the outcome that either of you want. So I would encourage you to be willing to say yes to do things, and to things that are going to help progress your career, but also be mindful of what you're going to have to trade off, because something's going to have to give.
I think the last thing on top of Margaret's point is also that if you say yes to every single thing, if you know that you're not actually feeling like your heart is in it, that might be something that ends up getting pushed to the side. You do not to the best of your ability, or kind of like Joe was mentioning before, there's just no follow through, and that looks worse than saying no to begin with. So just choose to say yes to the things that you know you can commit to, rather than disappointing people down the road.
I have one more question, if that's okay. I was just wondering if there's any formal feedback, or the process for feedback for leaders, for leadership, how they're doing, either that's chief residents or residents in leadership positions, if there's a formal process that you go through in order to provide feedback or give feedback.
So I can speak to this a little bit, because we're actually in the process of creating faculty evaluations, which we do yearly. We do ones that are just filling out ACGMA requirements of our ability to say, yes, we have given them feedback in general as faculty, but we're trying to work on getting more into the specifics and the nitty gritty of it, and creating these kind of meetings with the chief residents and the general residents in the whole program about what are our leaders doing well, and what can they work on. So that's one thing that we're working on, getting a little bit more feedback for our faculty. With regards to formal evaluations of our chief residents, there's none that I am aware of, but that's a good question.
I think when I was chief, it was more just kind of open communication. So if there was an issue, whether that was something that we needed to relate to the residents, or something was identified with a specific resident or whatever, it was more having open communication of like, I really need you to get this done, like to encourage the residents to do X, Y, or Z. And if we got it done, then you didn't hear about it anymore. If you didn't get it done, then you heard about it, and it was a, hey, why hasn't this been done? Not that really happened a whole lot for us, because my class is the best, but I'm biased. So I think it was more of kind of an open communication of like, these are the things that I need to get done, and I need you to do them. And then when they got done, that was kind of the end of it.
I might be speaking a little bit out of school, but I'm trying to channel Ashley Deutsch and the direct feedback she gives everyone for the projects that they do, because many residents' projects end up putting them in leadership positions because they're choosing operational things they want to fix. And she's very structured in how she communicates and gives feedback. And so I think there's probably a formal thing. I don't know if Ben knows more about that. I know with our fellows, we do a similar thing. So I suspect there's a system that I just don't participate in.
I mean, I think at every level, both for residents, other trainees, the fellows, and the faculty, there is a formal feedback mechanism. And if a leadership position is part of your job or your position in the residency, then certainly those skills are part of the formal feedback mechanism.
I'd like to add one thing that you didn't ask, but I've never worked in a place before, and it might be this is changing across the country, and I've been here for so long that I just am not aware of it, but I have more residents here ask me at the end of the shift for feedback. And at first I'm always stumped, because I feel like the residency case. And so for me, the end of the shift is actually a little bit too late because I'm like, well, we just talked about 8 things. So like, oh, hey, just checking. But it's actually part of our shift culture where we talk about feedback regularly and we're all open to it and we're all becoming more rabid to receive it and more graceful and hearing the hard things both ways.
Yeah, your night doctors don't always remember to do that. So I only work nights, and at 7 or 8:30 in the morning, often the resident is trying to get notes done, and we're all exhausted and finishing stuff up, and so there's not a lot of times that the night person is like, "Hey, can I have some feedback?" But we do. I try, and I'm terrible. And Ben could close his ears. I'm terrible about actually filling out the form, but I will drop an email to you as I go through charts the next day and as I digest things. I just sent one to one of the residents from 10 days ago, and I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. The email was open on my computer waiting to be sent, like waiting for me to fix it up and send it 10 days later. And I finally sent it. So the education team really pushes those of us who this is not on our radar that high to be better at this. So we do look for opportunities. But Jolie's right. Immediately after the code is the best time for feedback, not 10 days later.
What we don't always do, and that I rarely do, is say I'm about to give you feedback.
Right.
I give you feedback. This is the Joe Schmidt quote. The most important feedback you're going to get is the quizzical look in your attending's face saying, "You did what?" And a lot of people now want to say, "Please give me feedback and prepare me for it." It's like, no, you're going to get it all day long from the relationship you have. And there are times we give formal feedback. A couple times, minimum a couple times a year, I'll sit down with the residents and we'll go over what's going on and how they're doing. But it's far less important than is the stuff that came in during the middle of the shift. What's going on? It's just like, why'd you do that? Oh, great! You did a really nice job running that room, and I was really, really proud of how you stood up to the surgeon or whatever else happened at that point.
So I have a question for the medical students. Do you guys feel like you are leaders currently as 4th years?
Did they know they were going to get questions when they signed up?
I can answer from my perspective. I'm
Go for
a M4 at the University of Iowa. I feel like I've found myself into leadership positions like purposely. And so I don't know if just like naturally being an M4 makes me feel like I am a leader, but I feel like I've had to like purposely seek out those opportunities. So yes, in certain like realms, but maybe not like as a whole.
It is okay to have no as an answer. I'm just curious kind of what your sense is, right? Because leader is not necessarily solely by rank.
I can go ahead and kind of continue off what Catherine was saying. My name's Maria. I'm a M4 at UConn in Connecticut, I guess, obviously. But I think kind of a blend of what Catherine said. Like I've definitely taken on leadership roles, especially in my 4th year. But I think just reflecting, one of my roles is teaching a 1st year course, and just talking with the 1st years and kind of mentoring them is the most amazing experience. And I was reflecting when I was a 1st year, and I remembered how much I looked up to the upperclassmen, and just getting to now have that role, I think is a lot more responsibility than I realized. But I think it's awesome because to see the 1st years and be like, oh my God, I was like that like 4 years ago. So I think it's a pretty cool, maybe like unofficial leadership role that you maybe don't appreciate till you're there. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I feel like yeah, there's no formal. I feel like I haven't had many formal leadership positions during like my 3rd year into my 4th year, more 1st and 2nd year. But yeah, I think like more informal mentorship where you feel like finally we're here. M4 is, it's easier to speak to people who are going through it now. And I think that's like one thing during 3rd year that I craved more was having a few more opportunities to be mentors, have more leadership position. But feels like it's coming back now during 4th year.
Yeah, I could attest to that as well. My name's Rich. I'm from NYTCom over on Long Island. And I definitely feel like when I'm working with like 3rd or 2nd year students, I can like help them, like give them tips with like how to present better or how to just like do an IV or something like that. I don't have any like formal leadership roles, but I feel like more of a mentor in that respect when I'm working one-on-one with them in like the clinical setting.
For me, I would say like I'm a combination of it. Like I seek the leadership positions as they're available, just because I feel like there's opportunities to take on more responsibilities. But at the same time, I think what really drives me is similar to like what you guys were also talking about is the opportunities to just kind of help out the first and second year students. And like really am kind of driven by it's like, how can I make your life easier? Like, how can I tell you about these board resources and all these other opportunities and ways to succeed in the clinical setting, so that way you're not making the same mistakes that other people ahead of you have made.
That's awesome. I think it's this should be like a nice like snaps off to you guys to realize that even though you may not have like a formal title, that there's still ways that you guys are being leaders, even in medical school and even just kind of in your day to day. Because yeah, kind of with your fourth year rank, like to the first years, as you guys were kind of alluding to, the first years look up to you and are like, oh my gosh. And so I think it's nice that you guys are realizing that there's probably a little bit more leadership in what you're doing than what you had originally thought.
I think recognizing that, and that there will always be a more adult in the room. Like I'm like, oh, can't wait to be a medical student, you know, can't wait to be a resident, can't wait to be like out of residency and talking to my faculty and them being like, oh yeah, I have no idea what I'm doing. I always feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. So there's always a more adult in the room, but knowing that you can lead along the way. Absolutely.
Sorry, Niels, that's not true for you.
Niels is the most adult.
I was gonna say, Ashley, I don't know, it's not true for you much longer. You count as an adult pretty soon.
No, yesterday I ran down to Joe's office. Joe, I just did something really embarrassing and stupid. Help me like sort through how to deal with it. So it doesn't end.
Even when you are technically the most adult, like I worked at Franklin, which is one of our community sites yesterday. There is always another adult at another Baystate that you can call that can be more adult than you. I have done that for pediatrics when I was working up at Franklin as an adult, like one of my first shifts as an attending.
We have a few minutes left. Any last questions or comments?
Non-leadership related questions are okay too for our last few minutes.
Are there any like mentorship, like resident buddies or anything like that you do, like families? I know the other programs
We have
I've seen that before.
families.
Yay!
Yeah. We have like a big little system. It's a lot of fun. We do a lot of our like board studying together, which is great. And then when we have retreat, which in pre-COVID times, you know, is always the thing to aim to get back to, but we would have like group things that we would do together as those little teams. It's nice when I was an intern and I had my two bigs come and check on me when I was on off service. It made me feel not so isolated and alone. It was really nice to have kind of like feel like family checking in on you.
And you're allowed to have more friends than just your bigs, I promise.
I will say one of the things that we have in the past looked at sort of assigning formal faculty advisors. And what we found is both the faculty and the residents were way more efficient and created way better relationships by doing it on themselves. I think much in the way that Elizabeth said, that there were things we didn't need to apply structure to because the entire structure was set up in such a way that people felt very comfortable approaching. And you know, no matter how much we thought we knew about people, deciding which two people were the right pair was not right most of the time, and letting people find their own faculty advisors and their own mentors, it was much more effective and efficient.
I'm going to throw my email in the chat. If anyone wants to grab it and ask any specific questions, it is there. did that for our last one. It seemed like a good idea.
And she can hook you up with any of us so you don't have to watch all of our emails.
There you go.
She's tech savvy like that.
Yes, that's what I'm known for.
I think that's called being voluntold to do something just now.
But if there's then something else within the department, some other interest you have, and you say, oh, is there someone in the department I can ask questions about this to? I would be happy to direct you to them.
Elizabeth, you unmuted. Were you about to say something? Or oh, okay. Well, I guess we'll say, oh, Jolie unmuted.
I just have one ending thought. So we have another fabulous leader in the faculty who isn't here. She's camping right now with her kids on Long Island, or sorry, on the Cape where it's raining. Another one with 3 small boys. And so she just got enough Wi-Fi when this started and texted me and wanted to make sure it was okay that she, like, should I join even though I have spotty Wi-Fi? I'm like, I think it's okay. We have a lot of faculty. And she was like, well, is it too many to be weird? But we really like each other. Maybe they need to understand that we really like each other. I think the fact that so many of us showed up and wanted to see each other's faces gives you the best message of all, that even on vacation, and maybe it's the boys and the rain that she wanted away, but we really, I mean when I said that we're happy here and we have the same group of people that love what we do. And on that note, I need to skip out because I'm making up for the horrible, stupid mistake that I alluded to yesterday that I told Joe about. So I got to go apologize to somebody. Bye.
All right. Well, it was nice meeting all of you, and good luck with a process that's made more challenging by the current situation. And you know, I think getting to know, you know, in general sort of advice of how to pick a residency, obviously getting to know the program is perhaps the most important, getting to know the people, and that you'll have to work a little harder this year because much of that will be done distant. And so I wish you all the best of luck, and I think we'll end there. Anything else? No? Okay, thanks.
Thank you.